In a world where things change, but not really, comes a podcast about friends talking about some things that are strange. But if it was strange before, then this is stranger. But if it's already stranger, then would that make this stranger-er? I don't know. I'm just here to talk about some stranger things. And I am, of course, the one, the only, Dom, the movie nerd Rizzy. I've been on a bunch of different podcasts over the last couple of years, and I don't really know. I'm just not a guy that likes consistency. It's just a thing that I do. And I'm back. This is a little bit of a throwback episode to some people, for all of those guys who have been, just listening to me over the last couple of years and me just doing my thing. To my left, I have Chris Ivanko. Chris, how you doing?
What's going on, guys? Happy to be here.
All right, that's good. It's good to be happy and here. And to my right, I have another one, the only, Mr. Johnny Manna. Johnny, how you doing?
I'm doing quite well. Thanks for having me.
Oh, of course. Anytime,
and everyone,
dude.
This is Talkin TV on the Talkin Podcast Network.
Wow, the name is just revealed to me, into doing the first episode.
What
That's
Chris
pretty
said.
exciting.
All
I'm
right.
honored.
So, guys, we're here, as I said in my intro, to talk about some things that are indeed strange.
In your
Because,
house.
in terms of, just throwback. So, Johnny, I don't know if you, want to, just touch on this at all. But as you guys know, 3 years ago, the three of us, along with one other person, who unfortunately could not be here, sat down and recorded a podcast about a hit little show, that came out in 2016. I would argue it was probably the biggest thing to come out of that summer, and probably the first indication that Netflix was not to be messed with when it came to the streaming game in terms of killing off the theatrical business model that is. But I would like to think that Stranger Things, it's definitely not quite the same as it was when we first talked about it those 3 years ago, but, change is good,
Yeah, it's interesting because unfortunately we weren't able to talk about season 2, so now it's kind of just like we talked about season 3. What was that? 3 years ago? I think?
Something like
or
that.
Or season 1, I mean.
Yeah.
And
Why
then,
would you want to talk about season 2?
No.
We get it, Chris. You don't like season 2.
No, we'll get to that. No, yeah, but now we're talking about season 3, and this is it's been a month and a half since season 3 came out.
Just 2 months, just about 2 months.
Sorry.
Actually.
Yeah,
No, just sorry, a month. Yeah, I no matter. July 4th.
It's just Stranger Things 3.
That's right. Oh yeah, that's right. Because they are movies. Because their whole thing is that we rip off it. We include references to every single 80s movie. Therefore, we qualify as a movie, right? So now we're not seasons. We're just Stranger Things, Stranger Things 2, and Stranger Things 3.
Going off of that, I loved the Arnold Schwarzenegger homage to Terminator that we saw throughout the entire episode. The
I'm glad
Terminator
you like
series
that.
is one of my favorite series of all time.
I'm glad you like
so
that.
I really felt like watching Winona Ryder and David Harbour was watching John Connor and his mother run away from the Terminator. That was fucking awesome.
Yeah, first and foremost, before getting too deep into anything else, I will say that season 3 was definitely my favorite season in terms of pop culture references. It was my favorite season for that. Not my favorite season of the show. That'll still be season 1, which we can get into in a little bit. But for pop culture, as well as some other things, season 3 is my favorite.
And real quick, I just want to do a little housekeeping, and then we're going to get right into what everyone thought about this. Just so you guys know, this is a show about some friends hanging out, talking about TV, talking about movies. Yes, the title is Talkin TV, but let's be honest, that's just because it rhymes, and that's just because we're a part of the Talkin Podcast Network. We're going to cover anything from anime to webisodes to movies to television. Another thing about us, I have a podcast called Talkin' with Andrew and Chris. Johnny is a local musician, plays a lot of shows, is an incredible musician, and Dom is a film school graduate. So we all come from a background of creative influence, and we've been doing creative stuff for a long time, but this is something sort of new for us as a unit. We've all been friends, we've all been hanging out, so we welcome you to join us as we critique and dissect film, because we're here very much so to enlighten you, but mostly I would say learn along the way and challenge ourselves as viewers. At least that's what I'm here, right? To talk with my friends in a more, not in the diner after the movie, right? We're sitting down, we're doing it professionally, so we're thinking more clearly, and we're really challenging what we watched and seeing if it's just we're just, it's cannon fodder and we're just digesting it like the masses, or if we actually liked it and agree with the masses.
Hell yeah. And
so I just thought people needed to know that before we really dive in.
Yeah, definitely. And kind of to bounce off of that point, I feel like just in order to kind of further flesh that out a little bit. So Chris and I were talking a couple weeks ago when we were really breaking down and coming up with the idea for this podcast. And I feel like a big thing is that since a lot of the content now that we get just across everything, right? Obviously in terms of like all media branches, movies, and it's become a lot more than just movies and TV in the last 10 years of pop culture, whatever. And I find that a lot of the masses, it's not that they don't want to critique, it's that A, they don't actually know what it means to critique, and B, it's that they don't really actually want to talk about the stuff in content. It's more so they just want to take what the studios give them, yell about it if they don't like it, but don't actually really give any reasons for why they don't like it, kind of just yell and say they don't like it. And really, I'm not going to call out people, but I do definitely think that there is something missing, per se, in terms of the pop culture conversation. And all I'm going to say is that there's a reason why Disney owns everything, and it's not just because of nostalgia. Like, I don't know. So I feel like the purpose with this podcast is, yeah, we're going to talk about Stranger Things, and yeah, we're going to talk about all the different stuff that's big and popular right now. But our goal here, I feel like, is to try and, I don't want to say, like, come up with something new and different that not everybody else is talking about, but kind of, like, break it down in a way that, like, shows kind of why we still talk about this stuff, you know? Because it's like, yeah, anybody can talk about stuff that they love, but in order to talk about it and actually have it be, like, meaningful, I feel like that, like, requires taking, like, one extra step, you know?
Yeah, and I think to that accord, I agree with everything that you just said, but also, like I said earlier, like, we're being very honest when we say that this is
we're not holding back. So if you have any problems with opinions, well, guess what? They're opinions, and it's the internet. There's a million other places and things you can go and listen to.
That is true, and I was also going to say, in the sake of being honest, like, we're very much so here to learn and challenge ourselves as much as we are to critique based on our level of skill. So we hope that as we grow, you grow with the show. Now, with that being said, let's jump in to some talk about Stranger Things. Johnny, you're the guest. I'd love for you to lead off and just sort of give us, like, your loose synopsis of the season, what you thought, what you didn't like, and we'll just roll with it. We'll roll with it from there.
Okay, yeah. I was going to say, because you originally brought up the pop culture reference of the Terminator, so I was almost going to just suggest we almost start with that point, but
let's do it.
I guess before getting right into that, because you just asked my broad opinion, I would just say that I think Stranger Things 3 definitely delivered what you would expect in terms of just entertainment. Like, especially for the first half of the season, I immediately wanted to go on to the next episode. The acting, especially of the kids, was, as with the other two seasons, like, at its prime. Like, I think just in terms of just entertainment, it was basically what I expected. But yeah, in terms of the pop culture references, which we touched on before, I was curious as to if you guys, to like any other pop culture homages that you guys might have noticed, because there was Day of the Dead clearly obviously from the beginning. And
then,
they
went and saw that, right?
Yeah.
That was George A. Romero, right?
Yes, yeah. And then there was The Blob. There was Invasion of the Body Snatchers, which I loved.
Yeah, I like that. I like that they were going a little bit more subtle in terms of the references. Like, I feel like with this season, definitely, I wasn't going as much as with the last season. Oh yeah, that's that movie. Oh yeah, that's that movie. I feel like it was a lot more subtle, and like, I don't want to say that like the references were distracting per se, but it is definitely a little bit when I have to pause and say, oh, that's from that movie. Oh, that's from that movie. Like every couple of minutes. In
I
episodes,
didn't find myself doing that as much this season.
And I kind of like that I wasn't doing that.
And we're gonna dive into spoilers right away, just so everyone knows we don't do that spoiler-free shit out here.
I'm
we
sorry.
Just get
if you
right
don't
into
want to get spoiled, it's available on Netflix. Go watch it if you haven't watched it already. Like, what?
Now, with that being said, do you think when they were pulling the blob out of Elle's leg in the mall in the second to last episode, was that an alien? Would you say that was an alien's homage to ripping a cosmic being out of your body?
I'm not too sure.
Or would you say no because it has to explode out of the stomach?
Yeah, I was about to say, I thought that was a little bit more of like
I was thinking there's something uniquely iconic with the image of the alien coming out of the chest. But yeah. One thing that I just really loved right off the bat in the beginning of the season, going back to the Day of the Dead reference, is because I don't know if either of you guys had seen that movie previously, but we went
and saw it.
Oh, no, that was Night of the Living Dead.
Oh,
not Day of the Dead.
Okay.
Day of the Dead's
third
the
one.
third one.
Okay, I've only seen this first one.
Yeah, so it's the woman in the room with the calendar. I think it's a calendar, and all of the arms come out of the wall, and that I knew that was coming just because I had seen the movie, and it was basically right as she walked up to the wall, and the arms are about to come out, and that was like the big scare when that movie hit theaters, and it was right when you knew that was about to happen when the power went out in the mall and in the entire town of Hawkins. So it was kind of just like everyone who had seen Day of the Dead was like, okay, I know what's coming. This is the Day of the Dead jump scare, and then that didn't happen, and then the power went out. So I just thought that was really nice timing for people who were fans of that.
See, that's good homage. I think that there's a huge line of what is homage and what is blatantly stealing someone's idea Not that I even knew that reference, but to me, that's a creative way to pay tribute to something that obviously inspired the Duffer Brothers without ripping it off. That's really cool. I appreciate that, and I look for that in filmmaking.
Yeah. I'm not gonna look. So yeah, just get into my general thoughts. So my thoughts on season 3. I enjoyed it. I enjoyed it a lot in terms of kind of, I don't want to say solving a lot of the problems that I had with season 2, because looking back, I really didn't have as many problems with season 2 as I kind of let on initially. Yes, Chris, we know you didn't like season 2.
We'll get to that.
We'll get to that. But my thing with it is that again, it's my whole thing when it comes to movies and TV. I watch movies and TV for the story and the characters, and yeah, the story, it's repetitive. We know, everybody in the internet has said it already. The story is repetitive. We'll get into that in a little bit, but probably my biggest thing that I liked about it is the characters. This is still, they've proved 3 times now that this is a fantastic batch of characters and an even better batch of actors that play them. To all the kids that have popped that have come in and been made almost instant superstars overnight: Finn Wolfhard, Millie Bobby Brown, Noah Schnapp, Gaten Matarazzo, Caleb McLaughlin, Sadie Sink being added last season, Joe Keery, Charlie Heaton, Natalia Dyer, all those guys, and even the veterans with Dave Harbour and Winona Ryder. They are all still proven to be fantastic actors. They know these characters very well, and I still find these characters to be very relatable. I know a lot of people had a little bit of trouble. I remember this was a big criticism that I heard from a lot of people, is that they had a lot of problem with the first couple episodes being boring, and that the kids didn't exactly seem the same as they did. But I'm like, guys, that's the whole point. The whole point is that there's a year in between each season. And also, they're not kids anymore. They're teenagers. Guess what? People don't act the same way after a while. They're going to act differently as they get older and become teenagers more.
That's one of the other big things that I liked about before I get too deep into things I didn't like about the season, because there are a few of those things as well. But another thing that I really liked is it really did kind of do the whole thing where it went in a direction with the characters, specifically towards the end when they're all splitting up and moving in their certain directions. It kind of did what you didn't want as the audience. Like, you didn't like seeing that, and it kind of just was just a way of kind of just showing like that's also life, and that's kind of just how you relate to real life too, where things don't always go the way you think they're going to go when you're growing up.
So, were you done with your broad?
Yeah, that's my broad overall general thing on season 3 before we get into specifics. Because I'm not going to lie, I'm not going to say, like, the biggest thing with me was I kind of just watched it all at once. I was kind of like, okay, like, I wasn't, like, obsessing over every detail of this one. So if certain, like, things I'm a little bit blanking on, like, that's why. Just letting you guys know in advance.
So, I guess I'll just give my general overview thoughts, and then I think I have a pretty cool way to transition off of this into like the nit and grit. So I want everyone out there to know my stance, because we've hinted at it a few times. Season 1 is one of my top 10 favorite seasons of television of all time. It ranks number 3. And it has a magic that I have not felt since when I remember the first time I watched Star Wars. I was 11 years old in my old house in the Bronx, and that shit consumed me and changed me. Season 1 has a magic like that.
It was art.
Yeah, it was incredible. It was absolutely incredible. Now, season 2, I wasn't gonna watch season 3 until we decided to do this podcast. So I am so glad we decided to do this podcast, because I was laughing. I stood up out of my bed, off my couch whenever I was watching it in certain moments. I was so invested in this season. The first 3 episodes give me a universe where there's no fucking upside down. There's no goddamn stupid ass thing. Put those characters in a freaks and geeks situation and let it be like a Degrassi drama, because I could not get enough of that. And that's not really my style. And I loved it so much. The ambiance, the mise-en-scène, the lighting, the set design, the makeup, everything in season 3 was perfect to me. There are a few things that I kind of don't like, but I think season 3 took the formula from season 1 and said, okay, we tried some things in season 2. We have the powerhouse behind us that is Netflix, so we have this anonymity where we can get away with season 2 being terrible. We know it was bad, so we're going to give the people what they want, but yet something completely different at the same time, and I could not be any more of a fan. So what I want to ask you guys is, because we keep talking about, we're making the joke of I don't like season 2. So why why do you guys think that season 2 wasn't terrible? Because where were those, I mean, there was no payoff for those extra group of mutants that Elle went and found in this season. Like, maybe they could have came and saved the day in the mall, and that would have justified all the bullshit that we had to deal with.
Well, yeah, no, but you are right about that, but that actually has to do with a little bit of my problems with season 3 that we
because I can't be the only one who didn't watch.
You
didn't want to watch season 3, but was forced
you're
by the
100% right
by
and
the
justified
pressure
in
of
that.
pop culture.
You're 100% justified in that, but
okay. I guess a big opinion that I have in terms of the whole show. Some of it is just kind of my personal preference, but I'm curious as to what you guys might think of it as well. For me, at least, season 1 possessed a certain emotional depth, specifically with the finale, but also kind of with the rest of the season, that although seasons 2 and 3 kind of flirted with a little bit, they never quite hit the same way as they did in season 1. Season 2 kind of hit it a little bit. It was kind of a darker season, especially with Will and obviously all the possession stuff. But I guess a good counter argument to that is season 1 and 2, if I'm not mistaken, take place around the same time of the year, like Halloween going into winter.
Yeah.
Season 3 is a summer season. So like one thing that I didn't like as much about season 3, or at least it kind of took me out of it at certain points, was like, obviously season 1 and 2 had comic relief. You still related to the kids, you still found them funny at times, but some of the comic relief, especially in the environmental settings that they put into season 3, just kind of took me out of the show at some point. Specifically, I guess for an example, the carnival scene with Hopper and the Terminator, and like something
and
about
also just the Brett Gelman character this time around. I'm sorry, I could barely tolerate him in season 2. This season, get him the fuck out of here.
Something about the conflict and the chase in the carnival setting gave it a little bit too much of a Home Alone vibe to me.
Yeah.
Where I wasn't as concerned about what was going on, and it was more so like I like what you said, Chris, about how it had you laughing, because I found a lot of it funny as well, but it didn't give me that same edge of my seat emotional attachment that season 1 had.
Really? Wow. I felt like this season gave us the most growth and as far as character development. So we've now seen the formula with Stranger Things, right? Like each season they'll introduce a character that is going to die. Season 1 we had Barb, season 2 we had Bob, this season we had Smirnoff, Alexei. And I gotta say, Bob, they figured out that formula in season 2. He's one of the saving graces of season 2 for me personally. But Alexei, I went from hating him. I went from hating him to loving the little relationship that him and the conspiracy guy, what's his name?
I just call him Brett Gelman, the actor.
Brett Gelman.
Murray, I think is his name.
Sure.
I think.
We all know who we're talking about. The guy who's going bald. I love how he became, like, I love how there were so many different squadrons going off, fighting the same mission, and then they all pieced the clues together, because there was a charm in each little unit, right?
That's kind of what happened in season 1 as well, though.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's why I said they got back to the formula, but they expanded upon it, and it was more grandiose. I thought it was so interesting, the fight in the funhouse. We've seen that before. Look at movies like Us in the beginning, but I think the execution this time, being this sort of like throwback spy thriller, silencers on the weapons, he shoots the mirror, but then Hopper had the one up on him. It's a hall of mirrors. Like, Hopper easily could have died in that hall of mirrors. That was interesting to me, because like, how are you discreet in a carnival without like setting off, because they couldn't have, no one blew the cover there. They were clearly in public, but they did it in such a way where it was believable that the masses didn't see Alexei get shot. They didn't see, like, it was very low key and intense. I loved it.
See, that was another thing with me, is like, obviously the show's about there's another dimension and there's someone with psychic powers, so I'll forgive them for some breaks in realism. Obviously the silencer is never that quiet, but all movies do that. But I don't know, just certain things, like they just left Alexei's body after he died, just like in the carnival, and they left the bodies in the House of Mirrors, so it's just like, not that I was expecting the entire town to gather and go to fight the Mind Flayer, but I was kind of just thinking, like, wouldn't anyone see the bodies, and like how would that have played out?
So that is why I said I thought it was a near perfect season.
Okay.
But I think what the Duffer Brothers did that saves them on this season, which they didn't do in season 2, was they realized their budget. I think they realized the amount of time they had to shove in each episode. So at the end, if you guys remember, a lot happened in that last episode. It was jam-packed, but they did that little like documentary, like fake little 80s, like uncovering the truth thing about the town of Hawkins. So I think that was their way of saying, hey, we cleaned up some of these problems. Or maybe that was like a writer's room, like, yo, We didn't clean up that body. We left all those people dead in the carnival. How can we like sort of hint at the fact that that was a mess and acknowledge it, because it's too late now to go back and shoot. And I think that was sort of a way of doing that. Now that's speculation. So I agree with you. It's a near perfect season in my mind because there are little things like that. Like another thing that I want to go around with is, at this goddamn point in time, we had to sit through the worst song I've ever heard in my life.
Yeah, that was...
Joyce couldn't have waited another minute. I'm sick.
That was painful.
I'm sick of the needless deaths in Stranger Things. I thought that Smirnoff's death and Barb's death, those two deaths were justified. They happened in a realistic fashion. But the way they killed Bob and the way they killed Hopper was essentially the same damn thing, because we now know it's Stranger Things and someone important will die a season.
And you just listed off the problem inherently. So, like I said, I mentioned before that I didn't necessarily go as in-depth as this season with this season as I did with previous seasons. And I'm about to list out for you, ultimately, and let me know if I ruined the show for you and any other fans of Stranger Things. The reason why there are certain elements that feel repetitive is because it is repetitive. It's because we're literally seeing the same story told to us over and over again. It's just the only difference being that the characters we see visibly get older, because it helps that the main characters are kids. So we are witnessing them grow and change, and there is something inherently interesting about that. Seeing, like, kids come back and you see them grow older. Like, there's something inherently interesting about it, because I think as a sense, it's like, it kind of like is holding a mirror up to you in terms of like showing how you grow older. I think it's one of the reasons why Harry Potter, I think, worked. The movies worked, is because at the end of the day, I mean, granted, it never really did waver in quality, but at the end of the day, you still were coming back to it for those three kids and kind of seeing how they grew up, and you kind of felt like you were growing up with them, and it also kind of helped that it was a pretty big perennial growing up moment for a lot of us. You know, we're all like mid to late 90s kids, so we all kind of grew up with that franchise. So there is something inherently interesting about that. That's tackling the characters. The problem is that, again, it's the same problem going into season 1 with season 2. The Duffers never had any future seasons planned. They went in with one season plan, and they're like, okay, we're going to see how this turns. It was the Frozen syndrome. It's like, we are going to go in, and we're going to see how this works, and it turned out to be the biggest hit that Netflix has ever had. So Netflix went up to them, and we're like, oh, you guys got more ideas for more seasons, right? And they were like, yeah, sure, we have more ideas. Then they looked at, we're like, shit,
right, well,
more
like
upside
you
down,
said to me,
more will possession, more 11 psychic stuff, more 11 not blending in. And that's ultimately, I think, the biggest problem with it, is that season 2, we were still kind of coming off of just like the, whoa, that was the first season. What are they going to do next?
Yeah, because season 2 was a little bit after season 1.
Well, season 2 was only, the difference being is that there was only a year and a couple months gap, because Stranger Things season 1, like this season, was summer of 2016. Stranger Things season 2, they released at Halloween 2017. And so the biggest thing, going back to Chris, and also kind of comparing it to The Last Jedi, is what happened when they did try something new. They tried the 11 solo episode in episode 9. And what was the overall reaction to that?
Just cannon fodder.
Exactly.
Just wasted nonsense.
Nobody liked it. Everybody thought it was a waste of time nonsense. But that was kind of like, I don't know if they were kind of envisioning that as like a future storyline to incorporate in order to try and get away from the Upside Down, or if that they were trying to kind of do that as a backdoor pilot. I don't know what they were. But the point being is that the biggest thing that season 3 kind of solidified for me after season 2, and I think ultimately, and this is kind of why I like season 2 a little bit more than season 3, I don't necessarily think that one or two of them is better in my mind for me. I think it's just more so a fact of, yeah, none of them are ever going to measure up to season 1, because season 1, at the time it came out, it's like, yeah, there was nothing like this before, and we were ultimately seeing, it was more than just, I mean, season 1 could have just worked on nostalgia alone, but it was the fact of, I feel like it did, the reason why season 1 of Stranger Things worked so well is because it did what The Force Awakens did. There's the reason why we still love it, why I still love it. It's because it was combining that nostalgia with the sense of new, is the fact that we were seeing ultimately new and interesting characters, and that's what made it interesting. Yeah, there were references and allusions to other movies, but I would say season 1 is still the only season that truly felt like its own thing, and every season that we've gotten since then, the references became more and more overt and obvious.
Yeah, I think it's definitely really good to keep that in mind, that they only had season 1 planned. And I guess we talked a lot about what we all liked about the season, because there is a lot of that for season 3. So now, because we kind of mentioned what we didn't like a little bit about the season, just to put it in perspective for me and my opinion, season 1, specifically the finale, just the amount of emotional tension in terms of just Hopper and Joyce looking for Will while simultaneously showing the flashbacks of Hopper and his daughter, which hadn't really happened yet that season. Just that alone, I feel like delivered such an emotional blow to you, while you also have Eleven finally wiping out the Demogorgon when she basically felt responsible for letting it out in the first place and causing the entire season plot to take place. And then juxtaposing that with season 3, which the song was just bad television. Like, I sat back in my couch and was just like, this is bad right now. It went on for 2 minutes. You should never want to laugh while the main monster is on screen. Even though I'm not going to say it wasn't funny. It's kind of funny, right. But you just shouldn't be tempted to, like, I was looking for that same sort of emotional pull that I got from season 1. So then when that song happened in the second half of the finale, I was just like, this is bad.
Not to mention the fact that I am so sick to death of that cliche of, oh, we got to do this really last minute, but we got to get past this one person who doesn't know things, but we can't explain it to her, otherwise she might be put in danger. Dude, fucking... say to her, we're about to be attacked by a giant gooey monster, and we're literally gonna die. I don't know. That might just be a me thing. I'm a little bit less tolerant of those sorts of cliches than I was back in the day, but that kind of shit just annoys the hell out of me.
I mean, I got it. It was just all the other background music that came in too. And then another thing that kind of just didn't make sense to me with the finale is that one scene where they go out of the mall to go get in the car, and they see Billy out in the distance in his car, kind of revving his engine. And it's like, first of all, isn't he supposed to be part of that giant mine fight? Or like, whatever. That's not really the whole point.
Why didn't he charge?
Yeah, but he's just sitting in the back, and they're like, oh, wait, the car won't start. We need to go get a part.
Yeah, why did he give him all the time in the world?
Yeah, and then they go inside and they come back out and he's just still sitting in the exact same spot. Like he was waiting for them to be about to leave for him to try anything. That just kind of didn't make sense.
And the one thing I will say that I did like is I did like Dacre Montgomery this time more around. The actor who plays Billy, aka Red Power Ranger from the Power Rangers live action movie. He was probably the only part of season 2 that I legitimately disliked. Like I thought he did a bad job acting wise. Like I don't think his character was very, very well written. And I think the saving grace here is that they made him they gave him less screen time, which I think helped a lot. And I also think that actually giving him something to do this season in terms of making him the main outlet for the Mind Flayer, that helped a lot.
I thought they gave him more screen time.
He kind of really didn't have that much to do in comparison to season 2.
So I agree with you in the sense that I think Billy came to life this season.
Yeah.
We saw it was a very dynamic performance. Not as dynamic as I would have hoped for, not as dynamic as I read people saying he was, but still, nonetheless a dynamic performance. One thing I think that really helped this season, that I think the first 2 seasons... Season 1, they quite frankly got lucky, and season 2, they suffered on. The Duffer Brothers were less involved in the directorial part of the process. They only directed 1 episode of this season. If you notice, there was guest directors on all other 7 episodes.
Oh, really? Wait, hold on. They didn't do the finale?
They did the finale. They
didn't do the pilot and the finale.
They did not do the pilot and the finale.
Okay.
They only directed 1 episode, and this was the season where I noticed the most amount of different writers in the room.
Yeah.
So what I think needed to happen for this season to be successful, and why I think the season is successful, is you have the most amount of cast members you've ever had. I mean, there was a shot where there was like 14 people in the mall before that final battle.
It was a lot.
But it did not feel cluttered. It's like Lost is my favorite TV show of all time, but the one thing Lost did a terrible job of was not establishing all of the characters right out of the gates, and so when they tried to bring other characters in, like Pablo and all those other people later on, they eventually had to kill them off because the ratings were dipping, because they were like, okay, well, who the fuck are these people? Like, we don't care about them. So I think the Duffer Brothers are very much so young creators, and I think they're learning as we're learning about their show, they're learning about their show. And so I think this show benefited from them having a more hands-off approach as far as, like, being producers, directors, and writers. Like, the thing that baffled me about the first 2 seasons was, and one of my film school professors was always saying, like, I love the show, but they're doing too much, and it will inevitably ruin the show. And so season 2, he was saying that during season 1. So I don't think you can blame the actors necessarily as much as I would want to.
I don't blame the actors. Yeah, I've actually found that, like, in most scenarios, I rarely ever blame actors for ruining things anymore, because I find that most of the time, I feel like actors get a lot more...
Well, I guess that was more so to Johnny about Billy in season 2. Like, I'm not saying you blamed him, but I think...
Oh, yeah, I wouldn't blame him. He's just reading the lines.
Yeah.
The show seemed messy to me from when it got renewed for a second season after we found out that it only was ever intended to be a one-season
It's
show.
not that I don't know if it was intended to be one season. It was just a fact of we only have the one season like written out, drafted, ready to go. It's not like a situation of Game of Thrones, which is where you have all of those books to base it off of, or Sopranos, where David Chase like kind of like had ideas and outlines and he would like pitch the show. Obviously, like I said, it's not a network TV, so it's not going to be like the same thing. But I think the best example that we can go to in terms of like having an entire TV show planned out is Breaking Bad, because Vince Gilligan had an idea of like where he was going to start with Walter White and where he was going to end with Walter White, like before they even before they even started writing the first season.
And obviously you need the writer's room and you need to develop it, and each season is season by season. But I think what we're noticing is that these guys have a story that people are invested in, and so it'll be interesting to see how a season 4 or 5 go.
Definitely.
I think they've been combating the change in like age of each of these young people who obviously people grow up.
Yeah.
I think they're doing that very well. Really well.
Yeah, it's
now,
setting it a year apart, each season a year apart, like making it like a part of the show is like each season is the next year from each other. I think that is a very good part of the show, and I'm surprised that like it's still working as well as it is.
Now, I do apologize because I don't have much bad to say about this, but since we are on so I didn't mean to bring it back into more of a positive light. I just sort of thought of that as you guys were speaking about like the fact that I did notice the Duffer Brothers had taken a smaller role as far as directors go.
Definitely.
On the season, but let's bring it back to what Johnny switched us to as we're about like halfway through the chat here. One of the things I didn't like was I thought the moments were fun until they weren't between Hopper and Joyce. Essentially, when they were bickering and the bald dude who spoke Russian was the translator, whatever his name was.
Brett Gilman is the actor's name.
It was cool at first when they first got there, and he's like, take your Lobo Squirrel outside.
But doesn't it feel like he's kind of just there to be like, oh, I'm just here to yell out exactly what the audience is already thinking, not giving any sort of chance for subtlety, not to mention the fact that Joyce and Hopper, that romance has already been built up for a few years now, and this is just a little bit of a personal bias that I have in it, and that I just don't like watching romance on screen most of the time now.
I enjoy it.
So
I do enjoy it. Now, one thing I will say is we had the moment in the car where Joyce and Hopper are in the front seat and he yells at them, and then Alexei says, what did you just say to them? He's like, I told them to have sex already. And he's like, they haven't. I thought that was where that should have stopped. But then, in the most intense part of the show, they're down in the tunnel over radio. He belittles them again. Are you kidding me? It's the same scene.
Yeah.
We saw the same scene again. We saw the same scene so many times, but it was cool when they built up to that car moment, and then that should have been the last we heard of it, right? I mean, what do you guys think of that? That was a little extra.
I just think the moment didn't need to be there. They could have just had them get together, like, naturally, instead of...
Yeah.
I don't know why. Again, just talking about, like, cliches in big popular things that I'm sick to death of. It's like the obvious, like, arguing because we clearly like each other, but it's like one person said one little thing. No, it's like, you two are adult. Why is it, in that sense, I'm like, you two are adults, but why do I feel like the kids in this sense are acting more mature than you? I get it. That's something that goes all the way back to Spielberg with E.T. in terms of establishing that kids are smarter than adults and everything. But this is getting to a point where it's like, started to become just a tad bit unrealistic, you know? And I know that, again, talking realism in movies and TV is already a slippery slope at best, but this was one of those situations where I was just like, come on.
We have to suspend reality a little bit, but Johnny, I'd be curious to how you felt their relationship was this season and whatnot.
I feel like I don't have too strong of an opinion on specifically Hopper and Joyce's relationship. One thing I do always really like about Hopper is they always like play him off to be like lazy and kind of like lousy at what he does, but every once in a while he just does something to remind you that like he's actually a really good cop.
Yeah, and that's what makes him an interesting character.
Like the one scene where he's kind of just predicting what Alexei's gonna do when he gives him the car keys and gives him an option to escape, and everyone is kind of, even the viewer, like you're kind of tricked into thinking like, oh wow, Hopper was wrong, and then at the last second you're like, wait, he actually knows what he's doing.
Well, out of all the standout performances this season, and let me just say there was a fuck ton.
Yeah.
I have to say, I think David Harbour rightfully stole the show.
And you finally know his name now. Yes! Well, something worked!
So do you guys think this is it for him? Do you guys think he'll come back? What do you guys think? I mean, I feel like it's too good to be true.
I think that it's all going to depend. I think it's all going to depend on what he's going to do career-wise next. Because the whole big thing is that he's going to be in the Black Widow solo movie that's going to kick off Marvel Phase 4.
He's Hellboy.
He's Hellboy, yeah. We all saw how that turned out. And, what's it called? Box office flop and critical flop. It's really cool. I saw he released this like 30-minute short on like on Netflix that's like
I loved it.
I gotta watch watch it, so
That
I have
was
no
his
idea what it is.
passion
But like, all I thought watching the trailer for that was like, oh my god, is this his Orson Welles audition tape? Because if so, I am very down.
Let
for
me
this.
rephrase that. When I ask if you think he's going to come back, do you think from a writing standpoint there's a need for him to come back, or do you think
Oh,
that
absolutely
this
not.
being his
Absolutely
exit,
not. I think that this was
would
like.
you guys be happy if he doesn't come back, John?
Well, I mean, the thing with me is this kind of goes along with some other things I didn't like about the finale. Is just I feel like for one, his quote unquote death was really unclear. Like they showed in I think it was the first episode when the machine kind of malfunctioned and disintegrated everyone in the room, and that was when the machine wasn't good enough to open the portal. And then at the end of the season, you're supposed to assume, okay, now it is going to open the portal. So it was kind of unclear as to like what was going to happen. And then suddenly he just disappears. And for me, at least, I was kind of like, that was like, it just seemed like a very unclear death. And then obviously they did that thing at the end in the Russian base where they mentioned not the American. And then it was kind of like, oh, okay, so maybe he's not dead. But even before that, I was like, what just happened? Like,
what that screamed to me is that it was a situation of where Harbor probably wanted to move on to other things, right? He was getting ready to move on to other bigger things, and that like, okay, finally, Stranger Things made me a star. I can kind of go and do what I want, you know. He's like, he landed 2 big superhero franchises within the course of the year, right? Because superhero, you know, with Hellboy and Black Widow, Hellboy turned out to be a flop, you know. So I have a feeling that what happened is that I don't know how negotiations went in terms of like the specifics of negotiations, but I have a feeling that they wrote that post-credit scene as a backdoor of, okay, our original plan was to kill off Hopper, but on the off chance that since Dave Harbour's a big superstar
and
now,
the reaction,
and he does right,
probably the reaction,
and he
too.
does want to come back. Plus the reaction again, was a very heartbreaking death, and Hopper has kind of become a fan favorite. I want to hesitate to guess that he's in like the top 3 most like beloved characters from that show. So that's probably what it was. Is where they left it open ended so that they would have the option if it ever needed to come up. Because in case you haven't noticed, TV is no stranger to leaving deaths unanswered and then bringing characters back. It's happened all the time.
Okay.
It's kind of one of the reasons
Now-
why I don't ever believe that a character is truly dead unless they die on screen. And even when they die on screen, they still come back. Jon Snow being the most obvious one.
Speaking of Hopper and all this stuff, I always love to ask this question when speaking of a show that is an ensemble cast. Obviously, you always have a lead. Do you guys think this show is more about the characters or the town Hawkins in the story?
The characters, no question.
The characters?
Because the town is just a setting. It's ultimately, it's not a situation like The Wire, where The Wire, as great as the batch of characters that they have is, that show is not telling a story about any individual or set group of characters. It's telling a story about a setting, and the characters are ultimately meant to be embodiments of the setting. This is a situation about the characters. I'm sorry. To
Yes.
me,
You agree, Johnny?
Yeah.
This is right, especially with the personal growth and especially with the
Yeah,
children.
it's a
that you love from the
character-driven
beginning.
show, not
So,
like a...
with that being said, the reason I asked that, and I'm glad you guys agree because it allows me to take this next step, because I also agree with this is a show about the characters. Will this show suffer? And this is a bit of speculation, but do you think this show will be as impactful as it has been without Hopper and without this dynamic that I personally have grown to love of him and Elle being like a father figure, filling the gap beautifully for his tainted past of losing his daughter very unfortunately? Do you think the show's going to suffer without him?
No, and the one disagreement that I have is I feel like you're kind of mad at Hopper, especially in the beginning with how he's treating Eleven. You're kind of thinking with everything they went through, they were in another dimension. Like, just think about in your own personal life for a second. If as a kid you traveled into another dimension where your friend was lost and you fought off a demon that the entire world didn't know existed, and then afterwards you just wanted to be able to spend time with the guy that you met when one of you has powers, like, you're not really meant to like Hopper in that
Yeah,
situation.
it is pretty sucky that he kind of has to fall into the cliche dad role at the beginning of the season before they get back to business, and that
Wow.
it was a little bit of a step down. It's like, wow, they went through all this, and like,
Well, yeah, that's one thing-
but again,
I loved it. I could
Again,
watch a whole show on
it comes
that.
down to a writing thing of where it's not necessarily that they're trying to aim for anything new. It's they're trying to aim for something reasonable. What is something that you've seen before? Oh boy, Dad's not getting along because he doesn't understand teenage girl now. Like, again, seen it. The one saving grace I will say is the scene between him and Mike when he brings Mike out to the car and he's basically like, I will effing kill you unless, like, that I legitimately believe it, because that I feel like is the one instance where I'm like, no, he actually could do it if he
was some,
wanted
like,
to
Friday
and
Night
get
Lights
away
shit.
with it like really easily. But bouncing off your point real quick, I do think the show will suffer if it keeps going on, but not in particular because of Hopper. I think unfortunately because
Okay.
I think
that was my question.
I think it's because the Duffers have, and again, I'm glad that you have a lot of faith in them, but I think ultimately it's that the Duffers have reached their peak in terms of all that they can do, and I feel like unless they do something totally different, no upside down, no aliens, like you said, do a Freaks and Geeks situation where you just see all of them in different things. The problem is that's not Stranger Things, and that's not what people expect from Stranger Things. That's not what people love about Stranger Things. So what'll most likely happen is season 4 will come back, they'll find some new thing to do, but again, it'll still be like the upside down, and I do think it is going to suffer.
Before we go to Johnny, just to clarify, the Freaks and Geeks situation, that's just something I selfishly want. I realize that this is a science fiction show. It's like at the beginning of every horror movie is my favorite part before things go to hell and we get to live in the slice of life moment. I found that that's a niche I really enjoy.
It's
so
a great
selfishly
niche.
for
it's
me,
a great niche because you're watching
me,
people. So
you know, it's but so another thing I have to say is while we're on the characters, right? I do want to know another plot hole, right, Johnny? So you want to know what we don't like about the show for this half
Not
of the
the
chat.
show, the season.
This season, right? I mean, what the development that they tried to put on Mike and Nancy's mom just fell flat to me. It's like there was no...
I love that you still call that... I still love that you call that development. That's the funniest thing to me.
I mean, what was the motivation to cheat? She saw her husband sleeping on the couch with her daughter, being a great father, and so she wanted to cheat on him? Like, what?
No, that was the motivation to not cheat. She was about to go out, and then she saw her husband with a kid.
It felt unmotivated. It felt, where did that come from, though, to start?
Like in season
1, season 2.
In season 1, how Mike's dad was kind of never involved, especially even at the end when they get to the ambulance and finally see Mike after everything that happened in season 1. The mom immediately runs up and comforts Mike, and the father just starts talking to police officers. He was not empathetic at all for Mike's situation. So I feel like it was kind of just he wasn't emotionally involved with her, and I feel like that kind of led to that. But then it was seeing the emotional involvement with the kids that brought her back and made her not want to go out with Billy. But while we're on the topic of things we don't like, there are just 2 more quick things that are on my mind about that I'd love to run by you guys. I didn't like them trying to make the audience upset about Billy's death at the end. Like, no, you don't get to prop up one character as a villain the entirety of the season and then suddenly we're supposed to be sad about him dying just because you showed flashbacks for 5 minutes of him as a kid. The one counter argument on why I could see that being a good thing, though, is the fact that was Max's loss. Above anyone else, above any other character, that was Max's loss. So that was kind of her initiating herself and solidifying herself into the group, because up until then she was still kind of new, and her kind of just now it's she's really part of them because she's lost someone because of the Upside Down.
So let's unpack that first and then go to your second thing.
Okay.
I gotta say, I loved what they did with Max this season. I love the little friendship of Elle and Max. I love how we got to see the characters growing up and coming to life as young adults. With that being said, that is the only reason I felt bad about Billy's death, is not because of the turn from anti-hero to hero, is because of the emotional attachment and the acceptance the group had given Max. It gave me a reason to care for her, for his loss.
That's what I was getting at.
But his death and his emotional turn wasn't strong enough for me to be like, oh my God, that's so sad. He became good again at the end.
Because it happened so last minute, and because it's a Winter Soldier thing, where in some aspect he's being possessed, so... At the end of the day, regardless of how heinous his actions are, again, it's the whole Winter Soldier thing and why and it's the same problem of why the third act of Captain America Civil War barely works, because at the end of the day, he's still being mind controlled, so he's still ultimately not in control of his actions, so therefore at the end of the day, you can't sort of feel any sort of moral reprehensity or, like, complexity for the character, because regardless of how heinous of a character, if you could even call him that in Season 2, I more so just call him a waste of space because of how much he actually contributed to the plot of Season 2, but it's just a fact of the matter of that he's ultimately not in control of his own actions. So like, them throwing in that scene, first of all, it's unnecessary because, so what? It gives him, a reason for, like, being a piece of shit? Okay, his mom was cool. And also, to bounce off of your point about, like, his relationship with Max, him and Max throughout I'm talking the entirety of the series, right, that we've seen in between seasons 2 and 3, him and Max together have had a maximum of 3 scenes? 2? Maybe together?
And that's why
the problem with that is that, forget that, again, it goes back to the age-old problem of showing, not telling. Because I have nothing to base nothing to base off of with their relationship, therefore, I have no reason to feel any sympathy for his death, no reason to give a shit about the flashbacks when Eleven is doing it, which as a result kind of makes her performance and reason for caring kind of feel.
Side note, beautifully shot.
Yes, beautifully shot. But it kind of makes her like whole reason for like, you know, for having that big a gut punch emotional reaction to it. It kind of undercuts it because I feel like Eleven's already got such a strong emotional formation because of what we saw with her mother last season, which I actually do think was very, very well done.
I agree.
Right,
but again,
season 2 wasn't terrible.
The fact that she's having this much of an emotional reaction to a character that ultimately really doesn't deserve it and hasn't been given the justification for it, it kind of undercuts that moment. Combine that with the fact that his and Max's relationship is barely existent, and that again, so again, that undercuts her emotional reaction to his death. And it's also the fact of, 11 freed him, so he's gonna block her from this giant monster that, like, he's gonna hold off this giant monster all on its own. Again, sci-fi, but, like, that's just, like, too much for me for suspension of my disbelief.
Okay, yeah. One last thing I wanted to just touch on. This isn't as big of a thing as that for me, but it's still something that I didn't like as much. Some of the horror elements, the few horror elements that I did really like about season 1, season 2 got it a little bit, and season 3 in the first half they kind of did with the invasion of the body snatchers and Day of the Dead thing with the possessions. That was really cool. But then towards the second half, it kind of felt like at some points they were just forcing in small scenes to try to be scary, like in the scene where 11 goes and sees Billy as a kid, and then when she goes to wake up at first and she takes off the blindfold and she's suddenly in the house by herself, and then Billy comes out essentially, and then it essentially just felt like Billy came out just to say, you're all just gonna die, and then she came out for real. And it's just like, I feel like that 2-minute scene of Billy just walking up to her slowly saying all your friends are gonna die didn't really need to even be a thing. It just kind of felt like they were just forcing it to be scary, even though I got the message of it, obviously.
And again, this is a problem I think all 3 seasons have had so far, is that
Even season 1,
the beginning always is so smooth and so easy to latch onto, and they have a great way of hooking you. Like, all 3 seasons have hooked me so far, but towards the end, it always feels rushed.
Yes.
I don't know. The one thing I disagree about is I feel like season 1 had a pretty linear plot the entire time. A linear and simple plot of just finding Joyce's son. Like, no matter what else happens, that's the one thing you're constantly like,
it had a goal and an underlying theme that was ultimately motivating every other action and storyline versus
and
these 2
season
seasons.
1 more so than others, I think, has fought this problem the best. But I do think that if we want to compare it to all of the classic sci-fi shows that it so much so loves to pay tribute to, the thing is, the climax of Aliens, the climax of Terminator, that's what makes it legendary. That moment that we get to right before the resolve is so strong. And I think in season 3 we had our first taste of what this show really could be. But I do still think that it's weak in the sense that, like, maybe we don't need 8 episodes. Maybe these stories could be told in 6, cut some of the fat, and really just, like, that. If I'm just going to be completely honest and objective here, maybe it's not as strong, and maybe that's just because quality as a whole has gone down nowadays compared to the classic sci-fi that we love. You know, we grow up with iPhones now. Like, people in, like, the 1920s, like H.P. Lovecraft, never thought that shit would happen, so his stuff was completely imaginative and
still wrote about, like, future kinds of technology.
And maybe it's a thing of the times, but, like, that's why I think the newest Blade Runner isn't as good as the original, and that's why I think that, like, don't get me wrong, these are amazing seasons. Season 2, but, like, season 1 and 3, they're great, but, like, still the relationships of the characters resonate way more with me in Stranger Things than the quote-unquote oh shit moments, the climaxes.
Right.
They're always a little, okay.
Yeah.
Hopper died.
I
Whatever.
think
You know what I mean? Like...
Yeah, and ultimately that's a big thing that comes down to storytelling too. Is I find that a lot of big moments, again, we'll talk about, you and I have talked a lot, Chris, have talked a lot about a thing that we kind of hate about modern day movies and just things. Is I mentioned this on a lot of previous things, is that at certain points now it feels like certain decisions in terms of movie making are only made in order to inspire memes, because it feels like, you're right, talking about a lot of those big climax oh shit moments, yeah, we keep coming back to things because of characters, but the unfortunate fact of the matter is a lot of things that we love because they have those oh shit moments, because those oh shit moments are the things that we remember, because those are what resonate us, because those are what shocked us the most. And I feel like that's and the problem is I feel like just creators and society in general is taking the wrong lessons from that in terms of now I feel like we strive more so to make everything shocking, and as a result that's made things less shocking. It's a big problem that I have with Benioff and Weiss and their whole take on Game of Thrones, but again, that's a topic for another day.
Yeah, one thing just going off of that, unfortunately, I feel like some of the, like you describe them as oh shit moments, something that season 1 did that seasons 2 and 3 unfortunately can't do is just in terms of the revelation aspect of making those hit that much harder. Like, for instance, in season 1 where Joyce first picks up the phone and she kind of thinks she hears Will's breathing, and then suddenly you're like, and then the phone explodes and you're just like, whoa, what the hell, before you know about the upside down or anything. And then when you first see the lights spell out run on the wall, and the Demogorgon kind of pushes on the wall, but you don't know it's like something about the revelations of that happen each episode. And each episode you're like, wow, what can Eleven do next? And she makes the van like fly above you, and she like snaps the guy's neck, and you're like, every time they reveal something new, it hits you that much harder. Whereas in season 3, right off the bat, she was already making Billy like fly into walls and like throwing people around. So unfortunately, they just can't get that quite the same way as you could as a viewer when you're first watching season 1. Again, I still really like season 3.
Right, and again, ultimately, that comes down to just a movie watching thing in general, is that for sheer fact of the matter is you can watch something you love 1.5 million times over and over again. The sad fact of the matter is that if you watch the same thing or something similar, you're never going to get that same kind of a feeling as you did that first time. You can get something that comes close, you definitely can, but in terms of like that pure rush of just seeing something that you have no idea of what's going to come from, like, dude, there's no replacing that feeling. And the sad fact of the matter is that that's something that's going away more and more and more, because as we see more and more stuff, that's more so harkening back to, things that we already know as we continue into this wave of nostalgia. Like, again, that's just something that, like, that's just a feeling, that you can't replicate. And that goes into, like, more so screenwriting and good storytelling and everything like that, so.
Right, and that's what a part of the mission statement of this show is, right? Like, dissecting why those things have changed and why they occur in the first place, Wrapping this up, I want to say that I think another great topic for an episode would be first season magic. Hit shows, why do they become hits? Well, it's because that first season wraps you in. And do hit shows ever truly topple the discovery phase, as Johnny just highlighted? I don't know. I'd love to have you back on the show for that episode, and we can do a couple key examples. So we're not just going to, on this show, talk about what's trending and what's popular. We're doing that right now because, hey, we all had a great time watching these things, and, next week's episode is going to be Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. We all just went and saw that movie together. It was an awesome experience, and we just happened to be hanging out. It's summer, and we've been watching it, but there will be episodes that aren't about a specific movie per se. As you guys might have noticed in this chat, a lot of it was more so about filmmaking as a whole, and how and Stranger Things was the example to paint the picture on that, and the way the culture perceives it. And that's sort of what we plan to do. So another thing that we're going to start doing on the show is everyone who's on the show, we're going to go around at the very end before we wrap up. And I think it'd be great for everyone to give like a classic, out of like how many stars like you rated the movie. So Dom, why don't you go first, since you are the AKA the movie nerd?
So for my rating of Stranger Things season 3 is ultimately, it's not trite and it's not nearly as repetitive as I made it out to be. I apologize if I came off as overly cynical, but not sorry, because I never apologize for having any opinions.
So give us your rating, and if you'd want to see another season.
I would have to say that if I'm being fair, not being overly generous, I would say I would give this a 3.5, because it's not quite a 4 out of 5. Yeah, because it's not quite a 4, because a 4 to me is something that, like, I don't know, like, it's not quite like full-on magic, but it's still got like a little bit of the magic. And this to me, like, I liked the character moments and the different character dynamics, how they structured the groups, playing off of certain elements that I really liked in season 2, getting rid of other certain elements. But ultimately this season, and ultimately the thing of why, while it's not a bad season, it's probably my least favorite, is probably the one where the repetitiveness of the story just wasn't, and as great as the character development in those moments and interactions were, it just wasn't enough to distract me. Because ultimately what makes the we've seen great movies in TV, but to me at least, what makes the best, right? I've talked about this example before, is that there's things that focus a lot on story, and there's things that focus a lot on character. And the best ones, I think that we can all say objectively, are the ones that can always make those two mesh perfectly. Like,
And
have
with
a
that-
perfect mesh between that. And to me, I think the first season is still the only season that has done that out of these 3 seasons that we've got so far.
And with that being said, would you want a 4th season?
No, I would not.
Okay. And just give us a quick, like, 1 sentence. Why not?
Because I think they ended it perfectly, and because if I think they do another season, it's going to be like the repetitiveness is just going to come right back, because they already showed that, like, yeah, the Demogorgons and the Upside Down are what we're going to keep going back to, so...
Okay, fair enough. Johnny, what's your star rating, and would you want to see, and why, and would you want to see the show come back for a 4th season?
One thing that makes this a little difficult for me is before we did the season 1 episode, I had seen season 1 a handful of times. Season 3 I've still only seen once. And for just example, my opinion on season 2 changed watching it a second time around, so I could say that might happen with this season as well. But I'd maybe give it around a 3.5, but I would like to see more of the show. But one quick thing that I wanted both of your opinions on is I believe that when the show keeps going, I think that by the end of the series, 11 is going to fly. Like, I think it just has to happen.
Most definitely.
She can make
most definitely. No question.
Well, hold on,
question.
real quick. She can make other objects fly. Why not herself? I don't know if either of you have seen the movie Chronicle, but it's basically the same type of thing.
Good movie.
Yeah.
Telekinetic
Great
powers,
movie.
bleeding out
Great
the nose.
movie.
Okay. Her losing her powers was also a little unclear on why that happened. We didn't really touch on that.
Well,
but,
that's them leaving open for season 4.
but okay, yeah. I want your thoughts on if you also agree that she's gonna fly. She has the means
she'll fly.
to. She has
No
the
question.
means to.
No question.
I just want to call it
She'll
here
make her fly.
first.
Some
And
would say
everyone
she's
will go ape
already
shit about it, and it'll inspire
Okay.
a whole new line of memes.
And also, she floated a little bit at the end of season 2 unintentionally. She like floated maybe like 5 inches off the ground. She's gonna intentionally fly. I don't know about soaring through the sky with a cape, but there's gonna be some Chris Angel going on. All right.
And would you want it to come back for a 4th season?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm going to give it a 4.5 because I was laughing, I was emotionally distraught at moments, and I was consumed. I binged this in a matter of 3 days. And let me tell you, I could have went for way more. I'm a sucker for aesthetic. I'm a sucker for neon-y colors. And this show gave me a lot of that. It gave me a lot of callbacks to my favorite decade, both musically and visually. And it was charming. It very much so found its voice, in my opinion. And so with that being said, I would like a 4th season, with the exception that Hopper and Billy stay dead, and we get to watch the
Billy's
characters
staying dead.
cope.
Billy's dead. Billy's done.
Cope
Hopper's the only one that there'll be any consideration of if they bring him
not
back or not.
Billy.
Billy is
Yeah.
not coming back.
If they try to make the audience happy that Billy comes back, then I'm sorry. But all right, go on.
No, it's fine. I think that we need to learn how to let go of things as viewers of creative art this day and age. So I really hope Stranger Things can pay tribute to the 80s in that sense that things are permanent, and, you know, fan service, because people have voices now on the internet, should just be a way to communicate with your creators rather than have your fans dictate what the creator decides to do.
Agreed.
And so that also is going to be a topic for another episode. We have a lot coming down the pipeline, as you guys see. We want to thank you all so much for joining us on the first ever episode of Talkin TV, hosted by Dominic Rizzi, aka The Movie Nerd, with myself, Chris Ivanko, guested this week by Johnny Mana. Thank you guys so much. We're on all social medias at Talkin TV. We're anywhere you could find this thing. Again, check out our sister podcast, Talking with Andrew and Chris. We all have social media. We'll throw that link in the description. Thank you guys for watching this. Stick with us. We're going to grow as we go. And we
Watch
hope that you
movies.
guys-
Watch movies. Just like, I know it's difficult with the internet and everything because everyone's attention span is so goddamn short, but seriously, watch movies.
And read books. We can talk
And
about
read books.
too.
Yes, read books too.
Make it a book club.
But mostly watch movies and TV.
Support the art you like.
Watch movies.
And with that being said, guys, cheers and have a great rest of your day.